Hello, it's Dorian. They, them pronouns. Hey, me again, back at it. So, I've talked about Across the Spider-Verse. I've talked about this movie enough, and I've talked about this movie enough, and I've talked about this movie enough, and, all the rambling and ranting, and, no one needs to hear another word out of me. But, as much as I've. What's the word? Bloviated or something, rambled about it, there's still always more to find and more to think about and more that I'm missing. And so I'll stop and I'll be like, oh wait, this thing, oh wait, this thing, oh wait, this thing. And sometimes I'm always like, the Prowler, I didn't even get I to the Prowler, or I think I did talk about the Prowler before, not in the last video, but the one before that. But what made me stop and come over here was, I was like, okay, let me eat a little food. Let me go randomly search on YouTube and see what I want to see. And I was trying to find a video of that first discussion that I had watched to reference, the one with FD Signifier and Turb and some other black folks, but I couldn't find it. And then I was looking for other videos, and I stumbled along. Double Toasted had a review of of Across the Spider-Verse, and I was just starting to watch that. And I don't know all their names yet, but like the first guy was talking, and then it cut to, I think his name is Martin, and he had some misgivings with the movie, but liking it all right. And then it cuts to, like, the white guy, and he was saying basically, like, that Uncle Aaron was a villain, and, like, was confused as to why people were even mourning him at all. Like, was confused at the spray paint on the wall that said, like, rest in power. And he was basically saying, why would you do that? Why would you mourn him? He's the bad guy. He killed Peter Parker. And I'm like, what? And so I paused that video, and I'm like, no, I need to come talk about the Prowler. And if I was thinking about the Prowler differently before, then, I'm evolving on it. But I don't think that I ever saw the Prowler as a bad guy. I think that the Prowler is framed to look like one, to conform to certain tropes. Now, again, I'm missing a lot because I don't know anything about the comics, and so I'm guessing, I'm presuming, my guess is that in the comics, maybe the Prowler is portrayed as a typical villain, and then this movie is flipping the script where they'll portray it as a villain to play into certain tropes narratively, but then what they're going to do is really just show you that, but for the grace of God, but for the roll of the dice, but for the flip of a coin, except that it's also not random, it's systemic, like the Prince and the Pauper. Like, some people are given certain opportunities, and life happens to them in certain ways, and then other people are not given certain opportunities, and they can only take other opportunities. And so I think, even just earlier this morning, when I was talking about the difference between, like, the brothers, between Aaron and Jefferson, that one goes one direction and the other goes the other direction in a revolt against the other. So, like, maybe one dropped out of high school and then one goes on to be, that kind of divergence. And I was speaking to, like, referencing people I know in real life, of, like, siblings where, one of them, like, goes the opposite direction of the other one. Like, one isn't religious, and then the other one is very religious. Or one, like, drops out of like tertiary education and the other one pursues multiple like tertiary education, or like, you know, and they're like the context of you say it in society is like one hangs out with the wrong crowd or the other crowd. But and I think but it's a complicated mix of like what communities you find and what opportunities you have, and it's not like there's a good crowd or a bad crowd or a right crowd or a wrong crowd. And but there's, you know, there's gangs and there's violence for sure, and there's people who take advantage of youth on the street who have nowhere else to go and no other opportunities. And you know, and like Wakanda or Black Panther is touching on these themes with Killmonger, you know, but Killmonger, I think, you know, unlike Uncle Aaron, like Killmonger has good aims, but going about it in like violent means, you know, but Uncle Aaron, I don't think is, you know, like Killmonger in that regard. You know, I don't read Uncle Aaron as like villainous and like, you know, bloodthirsty, like in that, you know, we were robbed of Uncle Aaron's perspective into the Spider-Verse because, you know, we don't see the story through his perspective really. And I find it really telling that, like, basically the almost to the moment that Miles is unmasked and Aaron sees for the first time that this, you know, he's working for the Kingpin. Like, this is the, you know, this is the job he can find. This is the job he can get. You know, maybe he wasn't great academically in school or whatever, had some hardships, was a, you know, thought outside the box, was a really good art student, and but whatever, however life befell him, like he ended up one way, his brother ended up a cop, he ended up working for the Kingpin. This is a job he could get, this is how he could provide for his family, and he's what, like, he's the Kingpin's bodyguard or security guard of some type. So maybe the Kingpin says, hey, that person over there, that's a thief or that's a robber or that's one of my rival goons or something. I don't know, this is antagonistic to me, you know, go get him. And he tells his security guard to go get this guy, you know, and then chase ensues. And then as soon as the Prowler unmasks him, it's like, oh. And then, but we're robbed of that response. We're robbed of what Aaron was going to do with that information, because instantly he's killed by the Kingpin. And, you know, so I think it's telling that they leave it there, because then it's open to interpretation and you could see what you want to see, and you could map onto that Prowler is, you know, evil if he was robbed of a response, or good, you know, or anywhere in between. We're robbed of what his reaction would have been in that moment, so it could portray him in a more villainous light than he actually is. But I think that, you know, the most villainous thing that we've seen would be, you know, in Across the Spider-Verse, when he has Miles tied up to the heavy bag, and the way it looks like he's punching him through the skull, which would have been, but he doesn't. But he punches the back of the heavy bag. But again, you could have killed somebody that way too, with the back of the bag hitting in the back of the neck there. So that's pretty damn violent, you know. But I think it's played off as a warning shot rather than, but still, it's still, you see that scene mirrored into the Spider-Verse, where Miles is interrogating Peter B. Parker and has him tied up to a heavy bag. And so you see that all tracks of, and I think it's going to kind of be a story of like the Prince and the Pauper, of like, if but for one direction or the other. And like, that's part of what, I'm not making this up, I'm just absorbing what everybody is saying from all these communities, you know, from like the FD Signifier, like, and Bellamy Ray discussions and everything, of like, One version of Miles grew up without Uncle Aaron, but with his father, who's the cop, alive. That might lead him in one direction in life. And another version of Miles, his dad, the cop, dies, and Uncle Aaron is his provider. And this is a world without Spider-Man. And so comparing and contrasting, if you have these opportunities and these life choices and luck and maybe here you have supportive parents who can send you off to college, but here you can't afford college, you can't escape your conditions that you're in, you can't get these other opportunities, you're not going to some elite boarding school, you're not going to Princeton, you can't afford that. You're lucky if you could get into trading school, and the opportunities that you get or can't get. And then Rio is a single parent trying to raise a teenager while in mourning, while working double shifts as a nurse. She's going to have complete burnout, and she's not, where's she getting her emotional support, and how's she putting food on the table. And so you're growing up in much more impoverished circumstances and stressful circumstances, and all of these conditions of life. That's what I think it's going to be. This is not going to be a tale of hero versus villain. It's just, a different variant of each other based off of your life circumstances. And so I think it'll be interesting to see what story they tell with that. And then I guess at the end of the day, if you're comparing and contrasting villains, if you're comparing and contrasting Prowler with Spot, of wherein lies the difference, why is Spot the real villain? Prowler is not. Prowler is just, another side of Miles. So I think, I don't know. I had a through line that was connecting Prowler and Spot earlier, and I think I completely forgot it, of how Prowler and Spot are a flip side of each other, of your response to life getting the shit kicked out of you, and whereas you can have empathy for Spot at the end of the day, when he is not trying to figure out how he can survive in the world, he's just figuring out how he can seek vengeance and take what he wants. I'm just gonna take it, this is owed to me, so I'm gonna take it. And that sense of entitlement, and that sense of maybe white and colonialism and all those things of I don't have all these things and they're owed me, so I'm gonna get mad about it and I'm gonna violently try to take it from people and then seek vengeance and anger. Whereas the flip side would be okay, if life puts onto me these hardships and says that I can't do this, and says that I can't be this, and says that I can't do these things, and robs me of opportunities, and the whole world is not in your corner, then how can I, again, be like Miles, or be like Gwen, or how can I break through that? And what Miles says is I'm going to do my own thing and write your own script. So that's that different. So with the Prowler, so it's if these are the scripts that life has handed you, then how can you do your own thing? In contrast to the attitude of Spot, of demanding it from life, rather than kind of forging your own, or something along those lines, or that concept, I guess, is all I wanted to say. So, yet another thought bubble to throw out there. So I guess this is a PS thought to the last one on the Prowler. And of course you'd mourn Uncle Aaron. Why wouldn't you? So anyway, I just thought it was that maybe that's what they're going for with that. Okay, so later.